November 23rd, 2005, item number 106. Today's guest is Christopher from the Tech4GenY podcast.
Podcast411.com. Listen different.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Rob, and this is the Podcast 411 podcast. Before we get into the podcast, some quick news and notes. As always, anytime you have some feedback, please call 206-666-HELP. That's 206-666-4357. You can also send email feedback to podcast411@gmail.com. For all of you Wichita fans out there, Wichita released today the first in his video podumentaries on the Van Heffer band that he was part of. So definitely you got to go over to 5 Minutes with Wichita and check that out. For those of you that were subscribed to his podcast and are using something like the old iPod or X or an older version of an aggregator, you may want to resubscribe through iTunes so that you can make sure you can watch the video. And of course, I'll have a link in the show notes, or look for 5 Minutes in Wichita in iTunes. Well, I'm going to be short on the news and notes today, and I'm going to go ahead and take you into a rant I got from Bill. Here we go.
I wanted to send in a tech tip or something cool like Michael Carino does, but it turns out that what I'm really going to do is a rant. I've been trying to put together a small directory and maybe even an association of nature podcasters. This is Mother Earth environmental stuff, not the nature-based or natural, stuff. Anyway, things that you may hear in some of the more popular podcasts. So I am doing a lot of searching, listening to podcasts, and basically trying to put together a list. That part is going fairly well, but then I need to contact the makers of the podcast and tell them about the directory. Start pitching the idea of the group of us nature people exchanging promos, etc. By the way, I'm on my back porch and the power's off. That happens kind of often here. And the noise in the background is coquilles, katydids. You just heard earlier a really loud Bufo marianus and other rainforest critters. Back to my complaint. Well, and also what makes me think of you, Rob, is that many of the websites or blog sites for the podcast don't have any information about who puts out the podcast and don't have any email to contact the podcaster. So I look at the MP3s to get the tag information like you talk about. And of course, there's no contact information there either. But that's okay. I got to listen to them anyway, and I want to make sure they really are nature podcasts, and they're not actually podcasts about riding SUVs into the forest, cutting down every tree in vast swaths, and shooting everything in sight, which would be about nature, but not the touchy-feely, leave only footprints, take only pictures kind of nature that I'm looking for. Anyway, I listen to the podcast, and some of them are really great. Better than mine. Great ideas, but no contact information there either. But that's not all. Because a lot of the websites really do have contact email on them. In fact, the majority do. But you'd be surprised how many I've emailed, and they don't answer their email. It is like emailing into a black hole sometimes. So that is my rant. Please tell people to put their email information on their websites and in their MP3 tags. And tell them to answer their emails. Answer your emails. You can reach Bill and Lori at our email, bill@therainforestin.com.
Hey, that's yours.
Well, I'm the one that answers all the email anyway.
Well, maybe if I had one, I might answer some.
All right. Anyway, bill@rainforestin.com.
And yes, Bill does answer his emails. Trust me. I know. He's on the computer 24/7. He answers his emails.
Am not.
Well, Bill, thank you for that rant. And if you out there are not putting your email and your phone number at the beginning and end of your podcast, then you need to do so. And more importantly, as I've mentioned previously, you need to make sure your contact information is in your ID3 tags. If you haven't gone over to our ID3 tag tutorial in a while, go back to it at podcast411.com. Check out the tutorial. It's been updated recently. And make sure you have the proper information so people can get a hold of you. Well, we're going to go ahead now and get into our interview with Christopher from Tech4GenY podcast. Here we go. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hi.
And I'll start you out with the first question. And what was your first computer?
I remember going back in the early 90s, having an Apple computer. It was either System 7 or System 8. I'm not sure. But one day it broke, and then I moved to Windows. My parents forced me over to the Windows platform. All I remember was playing a game on it. That's about it.
See, that's a case where your parents didn't know better.
They're in every podcast, I can tell you that.
Okay. What was the first podcast you listened to?
That would be This Week in Tech. That was in Memorial Day. I was bored. I was going through the G4 videos section, and I found out Kevin Rose had left Attack of the Show. What happened was I did a little research, and I found the This Week in Tech podcast, which I remembered some of the names vaguely from the screensavers. I used to watch that once in a while. And then I started listening to them. And it was during the whole weekend, I just listened to the first few, and then I just started getting more and more cravings. So I listened to the archives. I listened to every single one of them. And then another new twit came out every Sunday, and after school I would just listen to it again on the computer. Then I just started to follow Twit only, because I would listen to the Chris Perillo show and a little bit of Adam Curry. All the other podcasts just didn't draw me back in. KFI draws me back in once in a while. I put that on my iPod to listen to Sync It. But Twit, really, I just follow every This Week in Tech. The day it comes out, I just sync it to my iPod and listen to it on commute. It's the only podcast I really am very loyal to because it delivers tech news in an entertaining fashion, so...
Let's tell our listeners about the format and the content of your podcast.
Well, I live in New York. I first came up with Generation Y back when I was listening to This Week in Tech. Then I asked a couple of my friends, Alex and Eugene, hey, you want to do a podcast with me? Everyone else, I tried to get Estrogen on the show. I tried to get other friends on the show, but there wasn't enough interest in technology. So I got some bloggers who were just my own age. The reason why I picked tech from the younger generation was because one of the podcasters who was replacing Alex on the show because he was going to camp for a few weeks. So I needed someone who just had enough interest in technology and just knew their stuff. So I picked Shuby. He knew his stuff. Well, he was one who led me over to the Teen Podcasters Network, teenpodcasters.com. Well, I got help from there, getting more permanent regulars on the show. They come with me every week to talk about technology, games. Once in a while, I throw into the mix movies and other random stuff.
Okay, so you are trying to kind of model your show a little bit after the This Week in Tech model, but with the younger generation.
Yeah, the focus was that I would deliver tech news from the younger generation with punditry, and it was basically the younger voice. That's what was the original goal. It still is.
And you have some pretty good name guests. Other than John Dvorak, who are some of the other guests you've had that people would recognize their names?
The very first podcast I did was with Leo Laporte. Actually, the very first was with Andy Walker, who I screwed up with because I was literally stumbling. I didn't know how to do an interview back then, and it was only with me. I didn't have any other co-hosts, so I was really nervous. It was Andy Walker, and Andy Walker is Andy Walker, and he I don't think he did that many interviews with podcasters back in June, so he didn't know how to handle me either. And I was only a kid, so he was unsympathetic. So I tried again just very recently, and I got the interview done. I got Adam Christensen from MacCast.
Right.
I've got Bill Macron from PC Magazine. I did one with Peter Rojas from Engadget, but we have to try that again. So there were technical difficulties, and I have a lot more lining up. I can't tell you.
Okay.
Okay.
Can't tell. That's my next question is what can your listeners look forward to in the future? Who are some of the future guests
I can tell you some other stuff. Like the fact that I'm doing a video cast with one of my team members, it's sort of like a break-off. Like what I was actually planning to do with Eugene Chu was a sort of games outlook. We are putting more of a focus and perspective on games. That's the idea, because mostly we're a technology show. But I'm going to put in more games. We're not going to turn into X-Player Attack of the Show. we're kind of like kids' show on the screensavers, but I'm doing a video cast with Alex on PHP and web design. That should be very interesting because video casts are just about to take off, and I'm doing a live Generation Y at the Apple Store. I'm guaranteed a live audience, not chairs, not robots. I actually do have an audience. It's in Manhattan, and we're going to do the recording there. Alex will definitely come, Eugene will definitely come, I'll definitely come, maybe a few other cast members. And since we'll all be in the same room, maybe it will sound better, maybe the quality will be... Editing, certainly I'll try to work harder on.
When you're recording your shows now with the multiple guys, how are you doing the interviews? I know you've mentioned you're using Skype, but how are you recording?
Originally, from episode 0 to 8, we would just do the recording, someone would just do it, and it wouldn't be recorded locally. Starting episode 9, I started recording locally. I would just mix it all together, and what would happen was I started editing 0 to 3, episode 0 to 3. That was horrible. So I got some other audio editors to do various edits, but no one has yet stayed with me, so I figured out, starting from episode 12 on, I'm going to do the editing. I'm just going to work hard and look in GarageBand and just do the tedious work on my Mac and do the editing. That's what's going to happen.
It's really important that you do your own editing because you know how you want your show to be.
Right.
The editing is the most important thing. The recording, if you record right, you'll have less editing work. But the important thing is when you're listening and you're editing, one, that you use headphones so that you make sure everybody, if you have multiple people, all the volume levels are the same. That is the most important because people are going to be listening with headphones. So if you've got one person that's talking really low and another person that's blowing you out, it'll be tough on your listeners. They're concentrating, they're trying to hear someone. They probably can't hear them because they're in the car, they're on the train, and then the other person blows them away. So it makes it tough for someone to follow what's going on the show if the volume levels between the speakers are not very close. They don't have to be identical, but they have to be pretty close, within a few dB of each other.
That was especially a problem during the early episodes, not so much with the later episodes, was the volume. I made sure before every single episode, we have all our volumes aligned and at level almost. So that's not as big as a problem as it used to be, especially with episode 0, which was really horrible. I mean, episode 1, rather.
Okay. Let's tell people where to locate your show.
Right, Tech4GenY.com.
What are you hearing from people your age, that are in high school about podcasting?
Well, no one really knows about podcasting yet, but it's starting to take off. The few who do listen to probably primarily the music, I think some sports, and other than that, really nothing with technology. No one's tech savvy enough to really listen to tech podcasts. The few who do are on my podcast already.
What is some advice you'd like to offer out to someone who's about to start that you wish you had known back when you started?
I wish I knew about the Teen Podcasters Network, which is at teenpodcasters.com. I'm following the same self-promotion as John C. Dvorak does. And I wish I also knew how to just get the editing right. To know how to record properly, number one. How to make show notes, really, about dig.com. Wait, I did know about dig.com. I didn't know about Dig Notes, which technically I got from Dignation. I wish I knew how the art of interviewing. That's what I wish I knew. And the art of editing, the art of speaking. I wish I knew more about technology. I wish I took more time to research technology and games, and I wish I had more people to tell me about that, as I do now. I do have a lot of people just advising me how to run this podcast, and I didn't know all those things back then.
Is there anything else about your show you'd like to mention before we get going here?
Generation Y is starting to grow, and I do have some more guest interviews, a lot more great guest interviews coming up.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, folks, that concludes our interview with Christopher from Tech4GenY podcast. Please check out his podcast at Tech4GenY.com. That's the number 4, And I really enjoyed episode number 16 of his show, being that that was the one he interviewed me on, but I'm biased. Chris, thanks again for coming on the show. Coming up at the end of today's show, we're going to play 2 promos from R. Francis Smith, also known as Random, and those are for The Whole Truth and Sturgeon's Law, but not in that order. But right now, I want to play some listener feedback. Here we go.
Hi, Rob. It's Miss Peter from the MusicNerve.com weekly music podcast, and I want to share a funny little story with you along the lines of how did you tell somebody about podcasting for the first time, except I haven't had a chance to tell these people yet, but I play pretty odd music on my show, so often I am out seeking musicians that are a little bit more hidden, a little less internet savvy than most. And recently I stumbled across a band that I really liked, and I emailed them and I said, hey, can I play you guys on my podcast? And they got back to me excitedly and said, yeah, that would be great, but don't distribute our music to anybody. And so now I loathe to the fact that I have to tell them that that's basically what podcasting is. But in case they say no, you're all welcome to come by my house and gather around the laptop and listen to them. Anyway, Rob, I think you do a great show. I look forward to each and every episode, and I'm hoping to get some baby updates soon. My daughter's birthday is April 6th, and I've got money riding on your due date. Thanks a lot, Rob.
Well, thanks, Miss Peter. And by the way, please check out Music Nerve. Good podcast. Link in the show notes. How many times did I say link in the show notes today? Someone send me an email. Let me know. Well, Miss Peter, per the birth date, right now the doctors tell us that it's 4/5. But right now, I am really more biased towards 4/11. For some reason, 4/11 just stands out in my mind. I just seem to have some affinity for 4/11. Not sure what it is. And per your story, some people just still don't get it, and that's what everyone is out there to educate the world about podcasting. If you're listening to this show, you should be an acolyte. You should be going out. You should be telling someone every day about podcasting and why podcasting is so wonderful. And then you should be calling me up and leaving me a message at 206-666-HELP or 206-666-4357 and telling me what those stories are. Or you can send them, as Miss Peter did, via email to podcast411@gmail.com. Well, that's going to do it for us today. I'm your host, Rob, from Podcast 411. As always, reminding you to listen different.
Yes, but 90% of everything is crud.
Hey, this is R. Francis Smith, known in the podcast world as Random, inviting you, yes, even you, to come check out my podcast, Sturgeon's Law, at www.sturgeonslaw.com. That's where I tell you about things that I think are cool, that is to say, in the 10% of things that aren't crud, in film, TV, books, comics, games, software, charitable organizations, anything else that strikes my fancy. I'll tell you all about it on the podcast and play some pod-safe music, and it's a good time for everyone. I stick to about 15 minutes, and we go up once a week, usually on Saturday. That's about it to tell you about the show. Hope that you'll drop by and give us a listen. See you there.
This is a different thing. It's spontaneous, and it's called wit.
Hi, this is R. Francis Smith, known in podcast land as Random, and my podcast is The Whole Truth, a daily reading from the New Testament in the King James Version. The Whole Truth first went online on January 1st, 2005, and since then I've podcast a short reading, usually between 3 and 5 minutes, every single day. I like to think it's a convenient and hopefully enjoyable way to get a piece of God's Word into each and every day. The Whole Truth is the Bible and nothing but the Bible, and no matter your reason for wanting to hear from the Bible, you're welcome and appreciated as a listener. Come check it out daily at twt.randomcasts.com or look for The Whole Truth at iTunes, Podnova, or the Podcast Pickle, or listen to it with the rest of the Godcast network at www.godcast.org. Thanks, God bless, and see you tomorrow.